The little girl's boots hit the asphalt so hard that the sound echoed across the entire parking lot. She was sobbing, her red dress catching the summer wind, her small fists clenched at her sides as she ran, not away from something, but toward something. Toward a row of leather-vested, tattooed bikers who had just pulled into the lot of a roadside diner on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Every single one of those bikers froze when they saw her coming. And when she screamed the words that came out of her mouth next, not a single one of them stayed seated on their motorcycles. Before we go any further, if you believe that kindness still exists in this world, that rough-looking strangers can have the softest hearts, and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when it matters most, please take a second right now to like this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs to believe in good people today, and subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this one deserve to be heard. Now, let's go back to that parking lot in Tulsa. Her name was Grace. She was 5 years old, and she had her mother's brown eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin. She had woken up that morning in the back seat of a car she didn't recognize, in a town she barely knew, wearing the same red dress she'd put on 2 days before. Her mother, Renata, had packed them up in the middle of the night 3 weeks earlier and driven them from their home in Memphis, Tennessee, chasing what she believed was a fresh start with a man named Troy. Troy had seemed kind at first, generous even, the kind of man who brought flowers and told Renata she deserved better than everything life had handed her. But by the time they reached Tulsa, Grace had already learned to read the silence in a room, the particular stillness that meant something terrible was about to happen. That morning, Troy's temper had finally broken through every mask he had been wearing. It started over something small, it always does, and within minutes, Renata was pressed against the wall of a motel room just off Route 66, her voice stolen by fear, her body trying to protect itself the only way it knew how. Grace had been sitting on the bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit named Buttons, and when she saw her mother's face, really saw it, something ancient and fierce rose up inside that 5-year-old chest. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She slid off the bed, pushed open the motel room door, and she ran. She ran across the motel parking lot, across a short strip of dead grass, and straight into the gravel lot of the Bluestone Diner, where 17 motorcycles had just rumbled to a stop. The riders were members of a Christian motorcycle ministry called Iron Grace, a group of veterans, recovering addicts, and working men who spent their weekends riding to raise money for domestic abuse shelters and children's hospitals across the state. Their president, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, had just pulled off his helmet when he heard the sound of small boots slapping against pavement. He turned, and there she was. This tiny girl in a red dress, tears streaming down her face, running straight for him with her arms outstretched like he was the only solid thing left in the world. Marcus dropped to one knee before she even reached him, instinct, pure and simple, and when Grace crashed into his chest, he caught her. She grabbed his leather vest with both fists and screamed through her sobs the words that stopped everyone's heart, "They're beating my mama. Please, please help her, he's hurting her bad." For one suspended second, the entire parking lot went silent. Then Marcus looked up at his brothers, and not a single word needed to be said. 3 of the riders were already moving toward the motel before Marcus had even stood up. 2 others called 911. A woman named Sandra, who rode with the ministry and had once spent 4 years in a shelter herself, crouched down beside Grace and wrapped her arms around the child, whispering that she was safe now, that help was coming, that she was the bravest little girl in the whole state of Oklahoma. Grace buried her face in Sandra's shoulder and held on. What happened next at that motel room unfolded with a swiftness that Troy had clearly never anticipated. He opened the door, perhaps to run, perhaps to check if Grace had truly gone, and found himself face to face with 3 of the largest, calmest, most immovable men he had ever seen in his life. They didn't touch him. They didn't threaten him. They simply stood there, blocking every exit, and one of them said in a low and steady voice that the police were already on their way and that it would be in his very best interest to step outside and sit down. Troy, whatever else he was not a stupid man. He sat down. Inside the room, Renata was found sitting on the floor against the bed, her arms wrapped around her knees, her lips split, her eyes wide with a particular kind of shame that survivors carry, the shame that is not theirs to carry at all. One of the bikers, a quiet man named Everett who had spent 12 years as an EMT before joining the ministry, knelt beside her and spoke so gently that Renata later said she thought she had imagined him. He told her daughter was safe. He told her she had done nothing wrong. He told her it was over. When the police arrived, Troy was arrested on the spot. Renata was helped outside into the warm Oklahoma sun, and across the gravel parking lot, she saw her daughter, her Grace, sitting on the knee of a big tattooed biker, being offered a bottle of apple juice that someone had run inside the diner to buy. Grace looked up, saw her mother, and burst into fresh tears, but this time they were the kind that heal rather than wound. Renata ran. And when mother and daughter collided in that parking lot, every single one of those bikers looked away for a moment, because some things are too sacred to watch directly. The Iron Grace Ministry didn't just leave after the police drove away. Marcus made phone calls. Sandra, who knew every shelter coordinator in a 3-county radius, arranged emergency housing for Renata and Grace at a facility in Tulsa that same afternoon, a place with a garden out back and a therapy dog named Biscuit who Grace immediately declared her best friend. The ministry covered the first month of expenses without being asked and without making any announcement about it. They simply did it, the way people do things when they are motivated by something deeper than recognition. Renata would later say that she had prayed that morning, a desperate, wordless prayer offered up from the floor of a motel room while she waited to see what would happen next. She had not expected the answer to come running across a parking lot in a red dress and black boots. But Grace had always been exactly what her name promised. Months later, when Renata had found steady work in a small apartment and Grace had started kindergarten at a school where she was already known for her fearlessness and her generous heart, Renata wrote a letter to the Iron Grace Ministry. In it, she described that day not as the worst day of her life but as the day her life actually began. She wrote that she used to think strength belonged only to people who looked a certain way or lived a certain kind of life. That day in Tulsa taught her that strength rides motorcycles and drops to one knee, that it carries apple juice and makes phone calls and stands quietly in doorways when standing quietly is exactly what is needed. Grace kept a photograph on her bedroom dresser, a picture someone at the diner had taken without anyone noticing. In it, Marcus is kneeling on one knee in the parking lot, and Grace is running toward him with her whole body, her red dress blurring slightly with the speed of her face wet with tears but somehow already turning towards something like relief. She called it her favorite picture. She told her kindergarten teacher it was a picture of the day the good guys came. Speech balloon. Before we reach the end of this story, we want to know something. Drop a single word in the comments right now that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. We read every single one. There are people in this world who look frightening from a distance and turn out to be the safest harbor you have ever known. There are children who carry more courage in their small bodies than most adults summon in a lifetime. And there are moments, brief, blazing, ordinary moments in gravel parking lots, where the world reveals that it is not as broken as it sometimes seems. Grace ran toward strangers because she had no other choice. But those strangers became something else the moment they chose to respond. They became exactly what their ministry was named for. Iron Grace. Because sometimes grace arrives wearing leather. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that goodness is still out there, that communities still show up, that a little girl's courage and a group of bikers' compassion can change the entire direction of a life, please like this video right now, share it with every person you know who needs to be reminded that people can be good, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. These stories matter. You matter. And every time you share one, you send a little more light into the world. Thank you for watching. God bless you.